Hello, friends. Today I'm talking about how talk therapy cannot heal trauma. Okay, so in other words, if you've undergone childhood trauma, if you've undergone emotional trauma due to emotional abuse, whether it's in a long-term toxic relationship or from a narcissistic parent or family member, or even a narcissistic boss, if you've undergone this type of trauma and you're trying to heal, you might have found that there's a ton of information out there. So you might have found that it feels absolutely validating to understand what has happened when it comes to this type of trauma, what it's done to your body. But you also might feel like, okay, like I get it now. I've been learning about this for a long time. Why am I not getting better? Why am I still stuck? And that's what I want to focus on today. I want to focus on how sometimes just talking or even learning about the dynamics that create trauma, while it's a necessary component, it's also not the only component needed in order to have a full recovery from trauma. Something more is needed. So that being said, let's dive in, and I'm going to show you, sitting in front of me here, I'm going to show you my brain. Now, it's not my literal brain, but this is something that I bought. And my kids, I'm not going to lie, like my kids cracked up when they saw that I bought this brain. They tell me that I am super obsessed with the brain, and they're not wrong. I am very obsessed with the brain. I have so many books on it. And even before I understood trauma, I was always reading about what happens with the brain. But anyway, I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but I really feel like it's important to understand. So we tend to think of our left brain and our right brain. So I'm opposite from you. So this is my left, okay? The left brain being the logical brain, the right brain being the emotional brain. But what really helped me to understand trauma was not just looking at our brain like that. Obviously, understanding that our brain can function sometimes in a half-brain state. For example, if you had an emotional flashback, you are stuck in your right brain. The emotional brain's on and the left brain has kind of gone offline. So it's important to understand the left and right side of the brain and what they do. But for the sake of this video, I want to talk about what's going on inside. So we're looking at the brain as if it's in three parts. The first part being the brain stem, or what people call the reptilian brain. That's on the bottom. On top of it is the limbic network. Okay, this is where your amygdala, this is where your emotional center is. This is where your fear-based trauma reactions are coming from the limbic network. Okay, this is the alarm center of your brain. And then on top of it, these folds are the neocortex. And the neocortex is where thoughts are. It's where language is, where planning and time orientation is. Okay, so that's here. What does this have to do with talk therapy? Well, talk and language is part of our neocortex. When we are talking, this is the area of the brain that we're utilizing. Trauma happens when too much emotion has come into the system. It's too fast, it's too much, it's too soon, to the point that the brain can't process it. And so it gets stuck in pieces, but it doesn't get stuck up here in our language areas of the brain. It gets stuck in our alarm centers, in fragments, in pieces of unprocessed trauma. Some of it has been processed, some of it hasn't been. Information, when it comes to the brain communicating with each other, information doesn't flow necessarily, or more often than not, from the neocortex to the subcortex. It doesn't flow down. So trying to talk about trauma so that we can process what's down here doesn't happen. The only time information flows down is because, or when information has first flowed up from the limbic area. Now it's in the neocortex, and now it can come back down again as well. That's processing. It's come up, now we can think about it, we can make meaning, we can make sense out of it, and then it's able to sink back down in a more processed fashion. talk therapy does not get to these areas of the brain. And that's why sometimes, let me put my brain back. That's why sometimes just talking about trauma sometimes can either make you feel worse or it can activate areas of your limbic network. Because when we're talking about it, think about it. When you're talking about the trauma you've undergone, you normally don't talk about it as if you're talking about the weather. All of a sudden you feel it, right? And things get turned on. Your limbic network gets turned on. And so that's getting turned on, but there's no information able to sink down into it to calm it. So the trauma, the unprocessed trauma gets activated when you're talking, and then you leave the session and you feel awful. And then you're trying to heal trauma that way. And after a while, it's just like, this is too painful. Like, I don't want to have to go through this in order to process trauma. I'm just bringing it up. I'm feeling it all over again. And then I'm just starting over again from the beginning, over and over and over again. That doesn't work. It causes re-traumatization, and it also can feed a belief it's impossible to heal. Okay, so then what does work? Now, I'm going to mention some things that I found to be helpful that I'm trained in, but I'm also going to mention things that I'm not trained in. I don't have as much experience or knowledge on those things, but I feel like they need to be mentioned. And then for me, every person has to find what resonates with them. Some modalities do, some modalities don't.